And if you are so inclined, please turn on your video so they can see who's asking them questions. But otherwise, I think we'll get going. Congressman?
Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Tom Suozzi, and I'm running for governor of New York State. I'm joined by Diana Reyna.
Recording in progress.
Oops. I'm joined by Diana Reyna, who's running for lieutenant governor. Diana served as a member of the New York City Council for 12 years from Brooklyn. She was the deputy borough president to borough president Eric Adams in Brooklyn. And when she's elected, she'll be the first Latina elected or Latino elected statewide in the history of New York State. So today we're going to talk about our 6-point government accountability plan. Why do you have to do an accountability plan? Because New York State's in trouble. We have the highest taxes in the United States of America. We have the rising crime rate that is chasing people out of the state. More people have left New York State than any other state in the United States of America last year, 314,000 person net out migration. So we've got very serious problems in our state, and it's costing us. And Kathy Hochul is failing us on crime. She's failing us on affordability. She's costing us in corruption. And we don't have to settle for it. Diana and I, if elected to be governor and lieutenant governor, will fight crime, will reduce taxes, and will go after the corruption tax that is costing so many people in New York State. So this plan that we're proposing is an effort to try and address some of the things we've just seen recently. We just saw the lieutenant governor arrested by the federal government for bribery and corruption. We just saw the Buffalo Bills deal go through a secretive budget process, slipped into the budget 4 days before the budget was due, and 63% of New Yorkers opposed that plan. There's a reason that Kathy Hochul, in the Siena poll released yesterday, has only a 36% job approval rating. And the corruption and the culture of corruption that she's fostering and continuing in Albany, I think is part of that. So I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation. If Stephen, you could put that up to go through our plan. And we'll try and make this as painless as possible. So it's a 6-point government accountability plan. Go ahead, Stephen. Governor Hochul, as I said, has fostered a culture of corruption in Albany. Go ahead. So that's not me, just me saying that. The United States Attorney Damian Williams at the press conference tonight announcing the bribery and corruption charges against Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin said, public corruption remains a problem in New York. It's a bipartisan problem. It's an ongoing problem. Go ahead, Stephen. The Washington Post last August, as I've said before, ranked New York State the #1 most corrupt state in the country. So this is, not a new phenomenon. Go ahead. It's not normal, as all of you know who cover Albany, that so many Albany politicians have lost their jobs due to scandal or indictment. And I don't need to go through, the past 3 governors, and Schneiderman and Hevesy and Bruno and Silver and Skelos and dozens of others. That's just not normal. There's a reason that we've been rated #1 most corrupt state in the country by the Washington Post. Okay, let's go ahead. Governor Hochul came into office, she's good at making pronouncements, but following through on those pronouncements is really one of the hallmarks of governing. You can't just say stuff, you have to do things. You have to implement the things you're going to say. So she came into office and she said, a new era of transparency will be one of my hallmarks of my administration. We will focus on open, ethical governing that New Yorkers will trust. And we all know, many of you who cover Albany know Blair Horner. He's been in Albany for 30 years. He's been in a lot of different positions. He's, I think, the executive director of NYPIRG now. He said the budget process we just went through was the most secretive budget process he's seen his entire 30 years that he's been up there. So forget about what I'm saying. This is what other people are saying. The system's broken, and Kathy Hochul is making it worse in the process. And that, look at what Blair Horner said. Let's go to the next one. So there are 2 decisions that have been completely within Kathy Hochul's control. Nobody else has any other say. She's been the leader of these two things, all in her control. These two decisions illustrate her lack of judgment, her inexperience, and her failure to address corruption. Number one, the Buffalo Bills deal. Bills Stadium deal remains shrouded in opacity. It's terrible governance to jam this in a secretive way into a budget. How can it be the most lucrative taxpayer deal in the history of New York State is released 4 days before the budget is due? No public hearing, no process, no discussion. There's a reason 63% of New Yorkers say that this deal is no good. And then another thing, completely in Kathy Hochul's control, she ran the show on it. It was her decision. She boasted about it. Lieutenant Governor Benjamin resigns following campaign finance indictment. And things, as I've said before, things have come out throughout the process from before he was selected, the day he was inaugurated, and then in November, it was disclosed that he did not fill out his vetting forms properly and didn't reveal that he had been subpoenaed by the federal government. And she doubled down, and then she tripled down again a week before he was actually indicted. Okay, go ahead. Okay, the aircraft use, we know about that one. She's now paid back $31,000 using state aircraft for campaign events. Emails reveal how Major Hochul donor seeks sway, going on in Albany for a long time. Kathy Hochul's become the champion of it, raised more money than anybody else, and more than Cuomo did in a shorter period of time. Did 300 fundraisers in her first 5 months in office. The New York Post, Governor Kathy Hochul work schedule shows plenty of time for fundraising. And we still don't have her schedule from January till now. I mean, so we had to plead to get her schedule through December, and it revealed that she did almost 300 fundraisers. Okay, go ahead. And now, most recently, this Hochul ad that was done with government money, promoting Kathy Hochul, story written by, I think, Mahoney in the Press Republican, about using taxpayer dollars to do what more or less is a campaign commercial. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so we've got a 6-point plan to try and address these problems. They're related to fundraising. They're related to slipping things into the budget. I think it was Mike Gormley wrote a story the other day about, to get the votes from the Long Island legislators, they put a $350 million amount of lump sum of money. No itemization, $350 million to get the Long Island legislators' votes. And they just put it into the budget. Wasn't in the executive budget, wasn't in the assembly budget, wasn't in the Senate budget, and they just slipped it through as part of a deal at the last minute. This is what's broken in our system. It's why we have the highest taxes in the United States of America. It's why we have all these problems. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, number one, I'm proposing that any expenditure over $10 million that is not included in the governor's budget, the executive budget, not included in the Senate budget, not included in the assembly budget, that is added during the budget process must be subject to legislative hearings. I think that's pretty legitimate. We have these items, the Buffalo Bills deal, the $350 million for the Long Island legislators, and I'm sure there's other things that I'm not even aware of that maybe you guys are aware of, but the public's certainly not aware of it, that were slipped in at the last minute as part of a big deal that involved billions of dollars, and the public doesn't know anything about it. It wasn't even debated in public. We heard for years the 3 men in a room. So now it's 2 women and a man in a room, but they're making these deals in the middle of the night, and the public doesn't know anything about it. It's a broken system. And the hypocrisy of Governor Hochul talking about how she's going to be the most transparent government. She's going to be the most ethical government. I call BS on that. Okay, go to the next one. 2, let's adopt the federal laws to lower the contribution limits and prohibit corporate donations for state campaigns. Right now, between the primary and the general, the governor can get, and the other statewide elected officials can get $67,000 in contributions. And we all know that Kathy Hochul has gotten a lot of $67,000 contributions from people who do business with the state, from lobbyists, from nursing homeowners, from people trying to get a cannabis license, from people trying to have influence on their business as it affects the state. Let's be very straightforward. Let's be simple. It's very understandable, very plain, commonsensical. Let's do the same thing at the federal government that we do at the federal government. $2,900 for the primary, $2,900 for the general, no corporate donations. Pretty straightforward. Let's try and get some of the money out. I mean, the whole thing with Brian Benjamin was about him trying to get campaign contributions. At least this would try and lower the impact of this stuff. Let's go to the next one. Quarterly financial disclosures. The last filing was back in January. We're not going to see one till the end of May. Let's do the same as they do in the federal government. January, March, June. January, March, June. No. March, June, September, December are the quarterly deadlines, and then they have to be released a few days after that, 15 days afterwards. Next. J-COPE has been this subject. You know, most the public doesn't really understand this. The reporters understand it. It's broken. It doesn't work. It's controlled by the governor and her allies. It's lost its bipartisan influence whatsoever. Let's just do what the 8 good government groups suggested and just adopt their plan. People who've been looking at this for years, who follow this stuff carefully, who have no intention to do anything other than to make New York State more ethical. Let's just follow what they're saying. The groups that include Citizens Union, Common Cause, Reinvent Albany, NYPIRG, New York City Bar, League of Women Voters, Committee to Reform State Constitution, and the Sexual Harassment Workforce Group. Let's just adopt their plan to create a ethics commission selection process. Okay, let's go to the next one. Ban the use of state, I've talked about this before, ban the use of state aircraft for non-official events. Can't use them. Simple, straightforward, can't be done. And you got to pay for it from your campaign. You're going to do a fundraiser in another part of the state, you got to pay for it with your campaign funds. Okay, let's go to the next one. And finally, ban the use of statewide elected officials' name, photo, video, voice, or likeness in taxpayer-funded, unsolicited mass communications within 90 days of the election. This is the same as they have at the federal level. It's straightforward, simple. It's what we should do. And this is come up because of the most recent, literally campaign commercial that I think that NYSERDA is running, or some other group, about Governor Hochul's energy policy. And that's really a campaign commercial for her. Okay, I think, is that the end, Stephen? Yeah. Okay, so the bottom line, Kathy Hochul is failing us on crime, as reflected in the poll. She's failing us on affordability, and she's failing us on corruption. We don't have to settle for this. Diana Reyna and I are offering people a choice. It's very clear. As governor and lieutenant governor, we're going to reduce crime, we're going to lower taxes, and we're going to cut the Albany corruption tax that is affecting so many of us because of the unethical behavior that's gone on in Albany for decades, and that's being fostered by Governor Kathy Hochul. Okay, let's open it up for Diana to share her thoughts.
Thank you, Tom. I just want to welcome everyone. At this time, Tom and I seem to be speaking with you more about ethical lapse in Hochul's administration. From her early days as governor, she was holding secret meetings. Until this day, we don't know because those meetings have not been disclosed. She used a state aircraft, as was mentioned in the presentation, to fly around New York, collecting more than $20 million worth of checks on taxpayer dollars. She's only reimbursed for some of those political flights when Tom called her out on it earlier this year. And there is a balance that still remains. Then there were the secret negotiations with her friends, the owners of the Buffalo Bills, forcing $1 billion bill onto New York taxpayers that the governor's husband may or may not benefit from financially. Meanwhile, family court funding for child care services has not. We don't know because there were no public hearings, no transparency within this deal. Hochul knew that there were ethical issues, concerns around her lieutenant governor. She chose to ignore them, and the warning signs were there to properly vet him. No ethical judgment. In all my years, I've always practiced and said we have to inspect what you expect. And when the elected officials won't do this inspecting on their own accord, that's when we need to look at ethical reform to hold everyone accountable. This election is about a choice between the same old Albany corruption, as we mentioned time and time again. New leadership that New Yorkers can trust is what New Yorkers deserve and are looking for. These are common sense measures that serve to restore trust in state government. And Tom and I know that we are those leaders that people will know and trust to restore what is a New York we can all be proud of. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Okay, so let's open it up for questions.
All right. Betsy, if you could unmute Zachary, and Zachary, if you could unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Zach Nick from New York One. I just had a question for each of you, if I could. Dan, I just want to ask you about the acceptance of your endorsement from Ruben Diaz Sr. As you know, he's been made numerous controversial statements in the past, considered homophobic. How do you reconcile that in terms of gaining his support?
So I did not just receive what would be Reverend Diaz's support. Reverend Diaz and I were colleagues, and we certainly know within our class of council members, there were times where we were at battle. But one thing's for sure, Reverend Diaz is a very respected leader in his community, amongst clergy. I was endorsed by 3 different individuals: Councilmember Rafael Salamanca, my former colleague, Ruben Diaz, former senator and council member, and a council member from Paterson, New Jersey, Luis Velez. I'm proud of these endorsements. I have other members of the elected official world that are eager to endorse. These are going to be times when, as government officials, we will not agree on everything. But one thing's for sure, we all understand this is not the New York we want for ourselves, for our families.
And Tom, if I could, I just curious, you talked about ethics reform and trying to get the money out of politics, which I think a lot of good government groups and reformers would agree with. Do you support publicly financed elections?
I would, yeah. If we could get it done, I would support it.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Do we have any other questions? All right. Oh, Michael Gormley. Sorry. Betsy, if you could unmute Michael, and he will. Michael, unmute yourself.
Yep.
Betsy, can you unmute him? There you go.
I'm all set. Yep.
All right.
A quick question on for both of you. Do you support term limits, as Governor Hochul has for statewide officials? Would you end 3 men in a room or 3 people in a room negotiations? Would be closed negotiations? And just a clarification on the aircraft. Are you talking about no use of state aircraft if it's a mixed use, or reimbursing for that mixed use?
No use of state aircraft if it's mixed use. It's too easy to be abused. And as a general rule, I don't support term limits, because I see in Congress, for example, and throughout my career, I've learned a lot more as I've gotten more involved in politics. I do support holding politicians accountable and voting them out of office when they do a bad job.
And 3 men in a room?
3 people in a room, it should not be that way. It should be an open process. I have found in my career that the best way to get an agenda done is to lay out a comprehensive plan to the public and sell it publicly, and to try and get people to support you and your agenda, a comprehensive agenda that was built with a lot of stakeholders, by bringing it out to the public. And that's the best way to get a recalcitrant negotiating partner to come along with you, is by making it very public. So I don't think that it should all be behind closed doors. I think it should be very publicly discussed.
But some of it should be behind closed doors?
Say it again?
But some of it should be behind closed doors?
Well, there's no question that people have conversations with each other without everybody there for every single conversation. I mean, that's just a normal part of life. But I think that listen, what's the problem that happened with this budget? A bunch of things were stuck in at the last minute to get votes that were of a large amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
So if anything is being proposed that was not in the executive budget, was not in the Senate budget, was not in the Assembly budget, if it's over $10 million, you can't do it. You gotta go through a public hearing process. I think that's pretty straightforward.
Thank you.
All right, Joe Mahoney. Yeah. So Betsy, can you unmute him, and Joe, unmute yourself?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think so. On the stadium, Tom and Diana, do you see this primary turning into a referendum on the stadium? That's question one. Question two relates to the stadium. If you're a state lawmaker, they will tell you they feel very marginalized in the budget process, with the one exception of the hearings that deal with topics within the budget that are covered by the budget. So that's their one crack at sort of weighing in and trying to drill down at these hearings. Many of us reporters covered several of these hearings during the budget process. There were probably more than 10 of them, when you look at all the different topics. So then you find out in the waning hours of the budget that there will be no hearings on this massive subsidy for the stadium. How does that make you feel? So that's question two. Imagine you're a lawmaker and you felt shut out because you were never given this information. We don't even know if Brian Benjamin knew about the stadium, because in one of his last appearances before reporters, he ran away down the hallway in the state capitol when reporters tried to approach him. But anyway, so on those two stadium questions, do you have any thoughts?
I think that the Bills stadium is definitely one of the issues that is going to be central to this campaign. It's going to be a referendum on the Bills stadium. It's going to be a referendum on crime. It's going to be a referendum on taxes and affordability. And it's going to be a referendum on experience and the corruption. So I'd say there's five issues that are really going to be at play of different levels. I would say number one is crime. Number two is taxes and affordability. Number three is the Bills stadium. Number four is corruption. And number five is the level of experience. So I think people are looking at all those things. But the Bills is definitely a major issue. And I can understand. I mean, I didn't even realize that what you said, which is that the legislators are very upset that they were marginalized in this process. I guess I understood that, but I didn't really focus on it. But the proposal that I've made here is giving them exactly what you said they enjoyed in the process, what they like about the process, which is to have a public hearing to discuss what's in the executive budget. I'm saying that if it's not in the executive budget, which the Bills stadium wasn't, if it's not in the Senate budget, which it wasn't, if it's not in the Assembly budget, which it wasn't, there should be a public hearing for any item over $10 million. So that would have forced the governor and the state legislature to discuss this issue before the public, give the reporters a chance to find out what's going on, to dig down in the details. Who knows? Talk about the whole idea that Delaware North, the general counsel for Delaware North, is the governor's spouse. The fact that the lobbyist previously for Delaware North was the secretary to the governor's spouse. I mean, so these are real issues that people deserve to have at least debated and discussed. Should it have been out in the suburbs, or should it have been in downtown? Should it have been subsidized this much, or should we have given developers the right to build housing and office space and retail where they could have made the money off of that to pay for the stadium, and it would have improved the economy of Buffalo in the process. Should the stadium have a roof or not? I mean, that's a big thing I hear about all the time. There's only 8 games. It's in Buffalo. It's the lake effect. So let's discuss, forget about, politics and I'm saying this and this. Have the people at least have a debate. That this whole campaign, we've got to force a debate in our state. Our system is broken. There's a reason all these people are getting arrested. There's a reason we have the highest taxes. There's a reason we've went from 45 members of Congress to 26 members of Congress. There's a reason that the crime rate's going up. It's broken.
All right. We'll take one more question. I'm not sure if we have one. If you have a question, raise your hand. All right. Okay. So I think you have some final words, Congressman.
Yeah, just very, very straightforward. Kathy Hochul is failing us on crime. She's failing us on taxes. She's failing to address the culture of corruption in Albany. In fact, she's fostering a culture of corruption in Albany. And we don't have to settle for this. We don't have to just accept what's going on here. As governor and lieutenant governor, Diana and I will reduce taxes, we'll fight crime, and we'll cut the corruption tax that New Yorkers are paying right now by opening up our government and letting sunlight be the best disinfectant. So thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate your attention.
Thank you.
Recording stop.